is how do you have a Donald Trump white power moment every day in your life?
Well, that's the thing about, voting. A lot of normies, they just conflate politics and voting like as if they're the same thing. But voting is like such a minuscule fraction of politics. The reason why the Jews win is not because of the Jewish vote. Like the Jewish vote in America is like 3% or something. In Australia, it's like 0.4%. But the Jews have more power than any other group in our societies. Why is that? It's because the Jews spend every single day organizing their community, pooling their money together, and then agitating the entire political system and funding, various projects that advantage their people and so on, in order to ensure that they get the political outcomes they want. They're engaging with politics as the massive collection of institutions and actors every single day in a multiplicitous way. They don't just wait till, oh, it's an election time, I guess now we get to do some politics. If that's politics, you're a dumb goy if that's all you think politics is. And that's part of what, the main thing that we're trying to teach white people in Australia, white Australians, but white Americans need to learn this as well, is that politics is not going to serve white people unless white people get organized and build pro-white institutions that are well-funded, well-resourced, that are professional, that spend every single day agitating, doing activism, doing advocacy, writing up policy documents, etc., doing the whole spectrum of political tasks on behalf of white interests. That's what the Jews have. That's why they get what they want. And other groups have this as well, but whites don't in any kind of serious way. And in America, when Trump gave his speech, his victory speech, I didn't watch the whole thing, but there was one part where he thanked black voters and he thanked Hispanic voters, and he thanked every single demographic except white voters, even though like the vast majority of his voters, like 70% of the total voters of the whole election were white. The majority of them voted for him. So white voters basically won him the election. Like every other type of voter put together was a much smaller percentage than the total white vote that he got. But he didn't thank white voters. It was the only group he didn't thank. Why didn't he thank them? Because there's no white organization that he has to deal with. There's no white leadership or representatives that sat down with him at some point and said, hey, Trump, if you want the white vote, here's our list of demands. And we're going to go back and tell white people to go and vote for you because if you, sign on to this agenda that we think is good for white people. But the Jews do that. The Jews go and have a backroom meeting with Trump. Only like 21% of Jews even voted for Trump. But the Jews had their guys go and sit down with Trump and say, hey, do you want the $400 million? Well, we want this policy. We want this policy. When you get in office, we want you to employ people from this foundation and that foundation to work in your administration to advantage Jewish people. And that's why they're winning, and that's why we're losing. And when this Trump administration fails to deliver upon the promise that a lot of the normies that voted for Trump on the COPAs and so on that think that it's going to be this epic thing, and when it fails to deliver and it disappoints inevitably, that's when particularly white Americans, but all white people need to come along and say, well, you know why that is? It's because there's no actual organization that represents white Americans that has any power, that has any money, that has any that forces white people to be directly represented. White people get represented as either conservative or liberal. They don't get represented as white people. And that's why neither of the parties serve white people or even try to serve white people and bend over backwards. Like when Trump is on the stage doing one of his rallies, you see a black woman holding up a Blacks for Trump sign, and then some like Latino holding up a Latinos for Trump, and then a woman holding up women for Trump, and then Asians for Trump. There's never whites for Trump. But like whites are the ones that are actually voting for him every single day. They just take him for granted. Whites will continue to be taken for granted until we actually organize and say, well, you know what? Here's the white leader. We appoint, John Smith to be the official head of, the white version of AIPAC, or the white version of pick whatever Jewish organization you can think of that agitates within American politics. And it's like, if you want to get campaign financing, you got to get John Smith to sign off on your policies. You got to commit to taking 10 people into your staff that we appoint, that we train up within pro-white institutions to go and enact pro-white policies inside the government. That's the only way in which you're going to get pro-white policies. You're not going to get it just by like hoping. And that's what that's all that most people are doing that are still on the conservative plantation. They're just hoping that maybe, Trump, or in Australia, Dutton or whatever, will be as based as the left says they are, but they never are, because that doesn't exist. And then people like us come along and try to build the foundation of something like that. And you all call us feds and Nazis and bad optics and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, if you just shut the fuck up and tried to work with us, we could build something that could actually work, because we are the ones that actually have that racial message of, until whites are organized around our race, we're going to keep getting screwed over by this system. The system will continue being anti-white, even though we have more money, more manpower, more everything than everyone else combined in all of our countries. It's disorganized, and so it doesn't count for anything in the political system, because it's not just about votes. The white vote wins every election, but it's not just about votes. It's about, as I said, it's about who has the manpower, who has the money, who's getting appointed to all these key positions, and why. And even the majority of the people that are going to get appointed to the Trump administration, or that get appointed within Australian government or in Australian media and influential positions, the majority of them are white, but they don't do pro-white stuff because there's no pro-white organization that has appointed them there. In order for them to get into that position, usually they have to prove that they aren't pro-white, prove that they aren't racist, and ingratiate themselves with networks that are actually controlled by Jews, or that are controlled by leftists, or maybe they're controlled by ideological conservatives that are white. But those ideological conservatives, if anyone gets exposed as ever saying a racist tweet, or ever posting a racist tweet or a racist Facebook post or something, they'll immediately get fired, and there'll be a huge media outcry that this person's a Nazi and they can't work here, otherwise you're all Nazis. And so the whole system is prevented through this structure from ever representing white people, and it's going to be like that in perpetuity until we get organized. And that's the lesson that everyone needs to take home, in my opinion. That's what we have to just keep reiterating over and over and over again, whatever form that takes. That's the only politics that will work. Everything else is bullshit.
Alrighty. Jake?
That's very well said. Before you guys continue,